It's all gone now, and I'm alone. After the last broadcast, I came to terms with the fact that I need to visit the hallway again. It became a symbol of her passing. I've been too scared to travel down it since what I'm no longer sure was a dream. I traveled to the hallway today, ready to mourn her loss, ready to sit at the very end and clear my head. But I found myself unprepared for the door. The one that I had checked to make sure it was no longer there. Well, it was there. I wondered if it was a dream again. If processing this moment was about to become more surreal than I had prepared for. I reached for the door, turned the knob hard, but it was locked. I took my hand off the knob, closed my eyes, and breathed hard. I heard a groaning sound. Not like a voice, or wood, but it was a warping of some structure. I heard it all around me as I breathed and tried to focus. Because if it was a dream, that meant I would have to will that door to open. I opened my eyes, ready to see Honey. I briefly looked down the hall and could have sworn it was closed off again. But I ignored that and placed my hand on the knob. This time it turned, and it clicked, like the mechanism was old and stuck. I swung the door open, and Honey was there, just as she was before, though this time nothing crawled out of her face. I'm grateful for that. But she still looked at me and said, "Kill me," while blood and lead spilled out of her mouth. I shook and tried to find my words. "Kill me," she repeated. "I already did," I finally said. "No, let me die," she said. I was so confused. She did die. She died back there in the woods. I did. I shot you, I said. I blinked and she was standing, and she was Honey, no missing face, no blackened leg. Honey, healthy and whole as she was before the first bullet wound. "No," she screamed at me. "Let me go." The hallway closed to a small room, and I was forced to stay and stare at Honey and wonder what she meant. And that's when I remembered. Every time I had imagined a way I could have kept her alive, kept her with me. And that's when I knew what Honey meant. But one more time she looked at me and said, "Kill me." I walked forward and picked her up, carried her like a child in my arms. Her half-chewed face leaned into my shoulder. Her blackened leg was like putty in my hands. I walked out of the basement and through the opening in the thorn brush. I walked back to where she was laying to rest against a tree, and as I walked, I remembered every time I tried to pretend I could have saved her, and I let those thoughts go. As I did, I could feel her decaying in my arms, the skin becoming tight, and the subtle yank of animals tearing away at an easy meal. Sometimes taking a whole limb with it. When I finished disposing thoughts about a past that could never be, I started to remember reality, and a past I knew was real. Honey, a terrible shot. but a great mechanic and medic. Almost as good at fixing up a wound as she was working absolute miracles on busted cars. Honey, who couldn't crack a joke right, but always laughed the hardest when you could. Honey, who didn't want the name she was born with, but couldn't figure out what she wanted to be called, so we called her by the color of her eyes. Honey, someone I should have known better before her untimely death. I finally made it back to the tree she took her final breath at, and I laid the corpse at its roots. I finally took a moment to stare down at her, but she wasn't the wrinkled, rotten thing I had felt moments ago. She was Honey, resting against a tree, staring up at me with bright eyes full of life. She said, "Let me die, but don't forget who I was when I lived." I promised her. And when she closed her eyes to rest against the tree, I took a good look at the forest in front of me. As I blinked the blur of tears from my vision, I was returned to the hallway and was left to stare at a room full of unlabeled wooden boxes. I closed the door without venturing forward. After all, I believed that room was a dream. So I went back upstairs, and I decided I should wake up at any moment. Except it was taking a while. So I started doing chores, and went to bed at nightfall. And when I woke up, the chores were done. And when I went back to the hallway, the door was still there. I'm not crazy. The house is alive.